Today's growth figures, the economy, even worse than you're told. I mean, what you're told is bad enough. The economy grew just 1% for the year, 1%. The bad news is we actually increased our population by more than double that, thanks mostly to the government's insane immigration intake. So you do the maths. 1% growth in our economy, 2% growth in our population. So that means, slightly bigger cake, much bigger population. We're getting poorer per person with more mouths to feed. And that's gone on now for most of this government's term. So it's no wonder the Treasurer is going around now blaming everyone but himself, including now blaming the Reserve Bank Governor, who he said on Sunday was smashing the economy with her high interest rates.
But the comments that I made on Sunday were just a statement of fact, and they've been borne out once again in the national accounts. If you look at the way that our economy is slowing, you look at the particular pressures in our economy, it's a combination of global economic uncertainty, persistent but moderating inflation and higher interest rates.
Oh, it's the Reserve Bank Governor. Oh, it's the global economy. Oh, it's everyone except himself. Former Prime Minister John Howard is not buying Jim Chalmers' excuses. As he wrote today, the real problem is the Albanese governor's lost control of expenditure. That's on Chalmers, right? And that has helped, of course, cause the high inflation, which the Reserve Bank then has to fight with high interest rates. Howard said Chalmers has tried to shift the blame for the pain onto the shoulders of his own anointed bank governor, and that was unworthy of him. Not that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese today was accepting blame for spending too much. I mean, don't forget, this government calls spending investment, and handouts are investment in people.
I believe we've made valuable government investment. We've been investing in people.
Joining me, Cameron Milner, former Chief of Staff to Labor leader Bill Shorten, now Director of GXO Strategies, Crisis Management. I think he should flog himself to the government at the moment. And Michael Costa, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer, a darn sight better than Jim Chalmers ever will be. Michael, what has caused these terrible figures?
Well, it's pretty clear that the RBA strategy is working. Their strategy is to slow down the economy. Look, the real issue for me is, I said last week that I found the Treasurer, vacuous and full of hubris, but today he's shown, and certainly with his comments on Sunday, that he's actually clueless. I mean, the RBA's target, remember, Andrew, is negotiated with the government. He signed that target off. That 2.5%, the 2 to 3%, the middle range being the 2.5%. So it's his target as well. So rather than just blaming the Reserve Bank, he ought to, front up and explain to the Australian people that inflation is an insidious economic destroyer, and that we have to fight this and do it in a way that at least brings the community with us and tries to mitigate the, the consequences in terms of unemployment. I just also want to make the point, Australia's real interest rates have been lower than, places like the US, Canada, the UK and New Zealand. We've got a real interest rate is less than 1%. And those countries have had interest rates, real interest rates over 2%, and now they're in a position where they can bring those down. So in a sense, by taking a sort of approach that he has, he's dragged out the pain in dealing with this inflation problem over a longer period of time. And I think he's frustrated because it was never an economic strategy, it was a political strategy to try and go to the election early and capitalise. And the final point I'd make is he takes credit for surpluses, which are completely outside of his control. They were because of favourable terms of trade and bracket creep, which is insidious as well. But on the other hand, he won't take any of the sort of downside pain that you need to deal with inflation.
Well, don't forget, there's only 2 surpluses that he'll deliver, and his budget papers say there'll be deficits for the next decade. Put the other side of the argument, put the case for Jim Chalmers, Cameron.
Well, the Treasurer is only as good as the Prime Minister's direction, and this is the Albanese Labor government at the end of the day. It's lacklustre, it's limp. And why are we surprised that the economic growth numbers are as weak as the Prime Minister himself? I mean, this is a government in Albanese's own image, and it's very weak, it's very lacklustre, and very, very not what voters want. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a series of economic numbers where people are in a personal recession, Andrew. Personal recession under Albanese. And little wonder he can't get the vote going. But it does say something that this number is even worse than the worst Treasurer in record on Labor's time, Wayne Swan. Wayne Swan managed to get it up to 1.2 in 2008. Today was 1.0 for Albanese.
Finally agree with you, Cameron.
Well, Cameron, I admire that pitch that you just made, but I have to say, Michael, in the end, Chalmers claims all the credit for the economic strategy. He was positioning himself as the next Labor leader. Now you've got economist Stephen Hamilton calling him the worst treasurer since Jim Cairns and the Whitlam government, and said this Labor government is the most economically incompetent in half a century. And Chalmers was even ordered off the property by an angry local during a live cross to Channel 7 yesterday. Have a look.
You can't be here filming, mate. No. We're asking you to leave. You can't film on our premises, okay? Been asked to leave. You understand you're trespassing. You're asking to leave private property. You understand you're trespassing, yes? All three of you? You understand that too, mate? You understand you're trespassing? You understand you're trespassing on private property and you're refusing to leave, yes? Okay, can you please pack the camera up and leave? Thank you.
It's actually trying to maintain eye contact with the TV host. But really, how much pressure, Michael, do you think Chalmers is in now got on him personally?
Oh, I think he's got enormous pressure on him. And look, I to an extent also agree with Cameron. I mean, you know, the Prime Minister does set the broad direction. All those silly policies, you know, Future Made in Australia, or all those green policies, are certainly fall in the lap of the Prime Minister. But the Treasurer's role is to oppose those. And rather than, you know, I've heard no reports of him opposing that nonsense. In terms of, you know, the worst treasurer, look, I'm with Cameron on this. Wayne Swan was probably the worst treasurer of all time, in my view. He spent billions of dollars in cahoots with Rudd to save us from a technical recession that people have been paying for ever since. And of course, you can't forget Bowen, who was there for about 6 minutes and managed to lose an election. So look, you know, to be fair to him, if he dropped the hubris and he dropped the sort of vacuous comments and just focused on telling it like it is, which is inflation is a problem, and there is going to be pain in trying to deal with it, not blaming the RBA because it's his target as well as the RBA. We'd all be in a better position to try and see this through.
Now, I've got to actually pay you on this one, Cameron, because I do think if Chalmers didn't have Bowen and Albanese spending billions and billions on their mad green schemes, which are falling over almost weekly, that would take a lot of heat out of the economy, I would have thought, and money in the Treasurer's piggy bank. But the Prime Minister was angry today, Cameron, about a report in the Daily Telegraph that has racked up a $3.8 million expense bill in a single year. That's just for travel for him and his staff, printing and communications. And that does not include private chartered flights, his mansions and his salary and his staff's wages of $10 million in a single year because it's got so many. Have a listen to him.
If they think that the Prime Minister of Australia should drive themselves around, they should say that. I'd rather do that, frankly. To be honest, I'd rather do that.
Is it fair enough that he's cranky, being picked on? I mean, I guess he's got to travel, but this much?
Andrew, what a glass jaw and what a tin ear to Australians doing it tough under his crisis of cost of living. I mean, this is a guy who's so out of touch. He thinks he can run around like a rock star on Toto One and run up the bills on taxpayers' tab. No, the Prime Minister's answerable to us, and he should have known this question was coming because $3.8 billion for one person is like a Taylor Swift flight, basically. So, no, the Prime Minister's completely out of touch, and that's what's showing up in the polls. That's why people aren't voting for him, Andrew.
I have to say, Michael, that this is not the first time I've thought in the last couple of months that his feeling at sea, his feeling ill at ease is lashing out a bit more than he ever used to in his first year when it all seemed easy and his popularity was through the roof.
Yeah, it's the same process other prime ministers have gone through. When the polls are up, you're walking on cloud nine, and when they start to turn, it's everybody else's fault, and you're looking for scapegoats. Change your media advisor when the problem's actually with you. On the plains, look, most people wouldn't care if the economy was going along well and they felt that things were right, because they understand the Prime Minister, shouldn't be driving himself around, and he's got responsibilities internationally. However, it's the juxtaposition of him flying around and everybody else, scraping and saving for petrol to get to work.
And also the sheer bloated size of his staff is just astonishing now.